A police officer arrests a black girl to a streetlight, but he doesn't know who her father is. The scorching midday sun witnessed an act of cruelty that would forever change the fate of many lives. Who could have imagined that a simple police intervention would transform into a case of national significance? On the city's main avenue, crowded with people, Anna, a 12-year-old black girl, was selling flowers to tourists when she was approached by Sergeant Silver. What happened next shocked all the witnesses present. The officer, without any apparent explanation, tied the girl to a streetlight, claiming a check. But fate had a surprising twist in store. What Sergeant Silver didn't know was that Anna's father, although absent for years, was a powerful and influential figure in the city. The identity of this man and the consequences of his actions would shake the local power structures. If you're watching this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. Comment on which city you are following this thrilling narrative from. As Anna cried, pleading to be freed, a crowd began to gather around her. Smartphones captured the moment, and within minutes, the images went viral on social media. Public outrage was immediate and devastating. The case gained even more attention when a witness recognized Anna as the daughter of a prominent politician in the city. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, revealing a much more complex plot than a simple police intervention. Tension rose with each passing minute. Sergeant Silver, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to release the girl, but the damage was already done. The consequences of his actions would trigger a series of events that no one could foresee. Meanwhile, in his luxurious office in the city center, a man was watching the news, his eyes fixed on the screen of his computer. His face, usually impassive, now displayed a mix of shock and fury. He had immediately recognized the girl in the viral video. The question echoing in everyone's mind was, how could a police officer have committed such an act of discrimination and abuse of power? And more importantly, what would happen when Anna's father found out about the incident? As the story unfolds, dark secrets from the past come to light, threatening to destroy careers and lives. Anna's case was not just a matter of racism and police abuse, but also of power, corruption, and the invisible ties that connect the elites to the marginalized. Should some truths remain buried, or was it time for the city to face its deepest demons? The suffocating heat of the city seemed to intensify the tension that lingered in the air. As Anna was taken to give her testimony, accompanied by a social worker, Sergeant Silver faced the beginning of a bureaucratic and media nightmare at his precinct. Silver, a 42-year-old man, son of a police commissioner, had always believed that his uniform protected him. He grew up in an environment where prejudices were veiled but persistent. His career, until then exemplary in the eyes of his superiors, was about to crumble. Internally, he struggled with the weight of his actions, torn between remorse and the attempt to justify his behavior. On the other side of the city, in an apartment overlooking the Central Park, Marco, a respected and feared senator in the corridors of power, gazed at the city with a distant look. At 50 years old, Marco carried the weight of many secrets, the heaviest being Anna's existence, the result of an extramarital affair years ago. Maria, Anna's mother and former domestic worker in Marco's household, now lived in a small apartment on the outskirts. At 35, she struggled daily to provide a decent life for her daughter without ever revealing her father's identity. The incident involving Anna had plunged her into a state of shock, torn between anger at the injustice her daughter faced and fear of the possible repercussions. At the precinct, young Lieutenant Laura, recently transferred from another city, saw Anna's case as an opportunity to make a difference. At 28 years old, with a solid background in human rights, Laura was determined to go beyond the surface of the incident, suspecting that there was much more at stake than a simple case of abuse of authority. Meanwhile, in the streets of the peripheral neighborhoods, The atmosphere was one of indignation. Protesters gathered at the spot where Anna had been tied up, turning the streetlight into a symbol of resistance against racism and police violence. Among them was Carlos, a 25-year-old activist, born and raised in the local community. His charisma and eloquence quickly made him the unofficial spokesperson for the movement that was beginning to take shape. Anna's story had touched on deep wounds in society. In the peripheries, residents shared their own experiences of police abuse. In the affluent neighborhoods, the case sparked heated debates about privilege and social responsibility. The city, known for its beauty and contrasts, now found itself forced to confront its most painful contradictions. In the mayor's office, Roberto faced an unprecedented political crisis. At 60 years old, with decades of political experience, Roberto knew that Anna's case could be the trigger for significant changes in the city's public safety policies. However, the connections between the police, influential politicians, and the world of organized crime made any movement potentially threatening to the status quo. In her modest apartment, Anna tried to understand the events of the day. At 12 years old, she was already familiar with the harsh realities of life in the periphery, but she never imagined finding herself at the center of a political and social storm. His dreams of a better future seemed both more distant and more urgent at the same time. As night fell over the city, each of the actors in this complex plot prepared for the challenges to come. Sergeant Silva, in his solitude, confronted his deep-rooted prejudices. Senator Marco made frantic phone calls, trying to control the damage. Maria embraced her daughter, promising to protect her at all costs. Lieutenant Laura devised strategies for her investigation, while activist Carlos planned the upcoming protests. The city, with its beauty and its scars, would be the stage for a battle that went far beyond the case of a young girl tied to a pole. It was a fight for justice, equality, and for some, survival. The next morning, the city awoke to unprecedented turmoil. Images of Anna tied to the pole dominated all the news, and public outrage reached alarming levels. What initially seemed like yet another episode of police violence began to reveal deeper and more disturbing layers. At the police station, Sergeant Silva faced an intense interrogation led by Lieutenant Laura. His initial arrogance gave way to palpable nervousness as Laura skillfully dismantled his justifications. "Sergeant, your claims of standard procedure don't hold up," Laura insisted. "Witnesses report that you used racist language before tying up Anna. How do you explain that?" Silva, sweating, tried to maintain his composure. "You don't understand the pressure we face on the streets. Sometimes extraordinary measures are necessary to maintain order." Laura, relentless, countered, "Extraordinary measures include violating the rights of a child." Meanwhile, in Senator Marco's office, the atmosphere was one of controlled panic. Advisors rushed in and out frantically as Marco tried to manage the crisis from a distance. "We need to bury this case immediately," he ordered over the phone. "Use all the contacts we have in the media. We can't let this story gain more traction." But Marco underestimated the power of social media. The hashtag Justice for Anna was already trending nationally, and celebrities were beginning to speak out. The case was spiraling out of control. In the outskirts, Maria received an unexpected visit. Carlos, the young activist, had managed to locate her. "Mrs. Maria," he began, "I know you must be scared, but we need your voice. Your daughter could be the catalyst for real change in our city." Maria, hesitant, replied, "You don't understand. There's much more at stake here than you realize." At that moment, Maria's phone rang. It was a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was familiar and threatening. "Maria, you'd better stay quiet. Remember our agreement." Tension in the city increased with each passing hour. Protesters began to gather outside the police station where Silva was detained. What started as a peaceful protest quickly threatened to turn into something more violent. In the mayor's office, Roberto called an emergency meeting with his security secretary. "The situation is getting out of control," Roberto thundered. "We need a firm response. Perhaps it's time to show that we do not tolerate this kind of behavior in our police." The secretary, nervous, replied, "Mr. Mayor, we need to be careful. Stirring too much in this hornet's nest could expose undesirable connections." Roberto, catching the insinuation, lowered his voice. "What exactly are we talking about?" At the police station, Laura made a shocking discovery while examining the surveillance cameras from the area where Anna had been detained. The footage showed something that went far beyond a mere poorly conducted police stop. "My God," she murmured, "this changes everything." Meanwhile, Anna, isolated and protected by social workers, began to reveal disturbing details about her life. Her words painted a much darker picture than anyone could have imagined. "It wasn't the first time I had seen this police officer," she confided, tears in her eyes. He had come to our neighborhood before, but no one ever believed us." Anna's revelation opened a Pandora's box. Laura realized she was not merely facing an isolated case of police abuse, but potentially a network of corruption and exploitation that extended to the highest echelons of power. By the end of that day, a series of unexpected events began to unfold. An anonymous informant leaked compromising documents to the press. Previously untouchable politicians began to be mentioned in connection with the case. The city, though accustomed to scandals, was unprepared for the magnitude of what was about to be revealed. As night fell, it became clear that Anna's case was just the tip of the iceberg. A much bigger battle was about to begin, a fight that would challenge the entire power structure of the city. Marco, sitting in his office, looked out the window with a mix of fear and resignation. He knew that his past was about to catch up with him. The phone rang, and the voice on the other end simply said, "It's time to pay your debts, Senator." The city, beautiful and brutal, was preparing for a storm that promised to wash its streets of long-buried secrets. The question hanging in the air was, who would survive when the dust settled? As the city buzzed with the revelations of Anna's case, complex subplots began to emerge, intertwining with the main narrative and adding layers of complexity to the story. In the local community, a young drug dealer known as Little J watched the events with particular interest. At 22, he grew up witnessing police corruption up close. But Anna's case sparked an unexpected desire for change within him. "Dude, I'm thinking about leaving this life," he confided to his best friend Tiago. "This story about the girl. You know she could be my sister, right?" Tiago, surprised by this change in attitude, replied cautiously, "You know it's not easy to get out of this, right? They're not going to let you go like that." The conversation was interrupted by a message on Pequeno J's phone. It was an anonymous video showing Sergeant Silva receiving bribes from local drug dealers. Pequeno J realized he had a powerful weapon in his hands. Meanwhile, at the local newspaper office, veteran journalist Sophia, 45, received a mysterious phone call. "I have information about the case of the girl and Senator Marco," said the distorted voice. "But I need guarantees." Sophia, sensing a scoop, replied, "We can meet in a safe place. Your identity will be protected." The informant was actually Pedro, a former assistant to Marco, who carried the weight of years of secrets and now saw a chance for redemption. At the central hospital, Dr. André examined Anna's test results with concern. Besides the visible injuries, there were signs of prolonged abuse that could not be ignored. He knew revealing this information could put him in danger, but his oath as a doctor prevailed. "Nurse," he called, "I need you to contact Lieutenant Laura immediately. We have crucial evidence here." At the city council, Councilwoman Julia, a young politician of 35, was preparing to make an explosive statement. She had received compromising information about several of her colleagues and their connection to the Anna case. "It's time to clean this house," she murmured to herself, rehearsing her speech. In the underworld of organized crime, the powerful boss known as the chief called for an urgent meeting. The Anna case threatened to destabilize the delicate balance between the police, politicians and drug dealers. "We need to contain this now," he ordered his lieutenants. "Use all resources. We can't let this case expose our operation." In a cafe downtown, Carlos, the activist, was secretly meeting with a hacker known as Ghost. Together, they were planning to infiltrate the police systems to expose other cases of corruption. "I have access to compromising emails," said Ghost, showing files on his laptop. "This is going to make the case blow up even more." In the outskirts, Maria faced a moral dilemma. A lawyer representing powerful interests had offered her a significant sum to keep quiet about Anna's true father. "Think about your daughter's future," the lawyer argued. "That money could change your lives." Maria, torn between the truth and financial security, looked at the photo of Anna on her desk. At police headquarters, a group of honest officers, led by Commander Oliveira, was forming a secret alliance to clean up the institution. "We can't let a few bad elements destroy everything we've built," Oliveira told his trusted colleagues. As these subplots unfolded, the pressure on the main case increased. Each new development threatened to trigger a chain reaction that could forever change the political and social landscape of the city. The metropolis, known for its ability to mix the sublime and the chaotic, now found itself at the epicenter of a storm that promised to reveal its darkest truths and perhaps offer a chance for redemption. The fifth day after the incident involving Anna dawned with an electric atmosphere hanging over the city. The metropolis, although accustomed to scandals and twists, was not prepared for the tsunami of revelations that was about to unfold. It all started with a live broadcast on social media. Pequeno J, the young drug dealer from the community, decided to make a bold gesture. With his face covered and voice altered, he began to expose shocking details about the corruption network involving police, politicians, and drug dealers. "Guys, here's the thing." His voice trembled with nerves and adrenaline. "I'm risking my life here, but I can't stay silent anymore. What happened to Anna is not an isolated case. It's all rotten, from the bottom to the top." As the video went viral, amassing millions of views in just a few minutes, journalist Sofia received the former assistant Pedro in her office at the local newspaper. With trembling hands, he handed her a USB drive. "Here's everything," Pedro said, his voice barely audible. "Emails, bank transactions, recordings, everything that links Senator Marco not only to Anna, but to a network of influence peddling and money laundering." Sophia, with her years of experience, knew she had the story of her life in her hands. "This will bring down the government," she murmured, already anticipating the headlines. At the Central Hospital, Dr. Andre faced his own ethical dilemma. Anna's test results revealed a history of abuse much more extensive and disturbing than initially suspected. When Lieutenant Laura arrived to collect the evidence, the doctor pulled her aside. "Lieutenant, what we found goes far beyond the incident with Sergeant Silva," he explained in a low voice. "There are signs of systematic abuse over several years. And furthermore, we found DNA that doesn't belong to a single perpetrator." Laura felt her stomach clench. "Doctor, are you telling me that—" "Yes," Andre confirmed. "We are facing a pedophilia network that may involve high-profile personalities." Meanwhile, at the city council, Councilwoman Julia took to the podium. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with expectations. "Dear colleagues, members of the press, citizens," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves. "What I am about to reveal today will shake the foundations of this chamber and our entire city." With a courage that surprised even her closest allies, Julia began to name, one by one, the politicians involved in the corruption system, detailing their connections to the criminal underworld. At police headquarters, Commander Oliveira and his group of honest officers watched the broadcast with a mix of horror and determination. "It's now or never," Oliveira said to his colleagues. We need to act before they start destroying the evidence. Within hours, simultaneous operations were launched across the city. Search and seizure warrants were executed in political offices, police stations, and even in luxury mansions in wealthy neighborhoods. The boss, the leader of organized crime, was caught off guard in his secret hideout when tactical agents stormed the place. "How did you find me?" he shouted, incredulous, as he was handcuffed. In Senator Marco's apartment, it was panic. Assistants were running back and forth, destroying documents and deleting digital files. Marco, pale and sweating, was desperately trying to contact his longtime allies. "No one is answering," he yelled, throwing the phone against the wall. "It's over. We're alone in this mess." As the city erupted with arrests and revelations, Maria and Anna were taken to a safe location by intelligence agents. Maria's decision to reject the bribe and cooperate with the investigation had been crucial to unraveling the entire case. "Mom, where are we going?" Anna asked, frightened by all the commotion. Maria hugged her daughter, tears in her eyes. "To a safe place, my love. Finally, a place where we can start over." As night fell over the city, the metropolis that had always lived on the edge between paradise and chaos faced its moment of truth. In the communities, downtown, and in the halls of power, there was a sense that nothing would ever be the same again. The Anna case, which had started as a sad episode of police violence, had turned into the spark of a revolution that promised to expose the rotten guts of a corrupt system and perhaps offer a chance for a new beginning for the city. But while some celebrated what seemed to be the triumph of justice, others wondered what would be the consequences of this massive exposure. And more importantly, who would really come out victorious when the dust settled? The 48 hours that followed the turning point were a whirlwind of events that shook the city to its foundations. The metropolis, accustomed to scandals and twists, now found itself at the epicenter of an unprecedented political and social storm. The morning after the explosive revelations, the streets of downtown and the affluent neighborhoods were flooded with protesters. Thousands of citizens from all social classes marched together under the cry of "Enough with corruption." The movement, which had started with the Anna case, now represented a popular clamor for deep changes. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of power, it was chaos. The mayor's office had become a besieged fortress. Mayor Roberto, watching his allies fall one by one, desperately fought to cling to power. "I can't resign now," he shouted to his remaining aides. "That would be to admit my guilt." But the pressure was relentless. With every hour, new evidence emerged, linking high-ranking government officials to corruption systems and the criminal underworld. In the city council, the atmosphere was that of a sinking ship. Councillors rushed to strike plea deals, while others desperately tried to dissociate themselves from colleagues now exposed as criminals. Councillor Julia, whose courage had triggered part of the revelations, now found herself elevated to the status of a popular heroine. Requests for interviews and invitations to conferences flooded her office. "I'm not a heroine," she insisted during a local TV interview. "I just did what any honest citizen would do. The real heroine is Anna, whose courage inspired us all." At police headquarters, an unprecedented cleanup was underway. Commander Oliveira, now promoted to chief of police, led a task force to identify and purge corrupt elements from the institution. "We will rebuild the people's trust in the police," he declared at a press conference. "Every officer will be evaluated, and those who are not up to the task of serving and protecting will be removed." In the communities, the impact of the revelations was felt even more viscerally. The video of Pequeno J exposing police corruption had inspired others to speak out. Young people who once saw trafficking as their only option in life were beginning to envision possibilities for change. Non-governmental organizations and community leaders seized this moment to push for investments in education, health, and infrastructure in the most disadvantaged areas. In the legal realm, the public prosecutor's office and the civil police worked at a frantic pace. Dozens of arrest warrants were executed daily, targeting both politicians and businessmen, as well as organized crime leaders. The boss, captured in his hideout, now faced the prospect of decades in prison. His downfall represented a significant blow to the structures of organized crime in the city. Meanwhile, Anna and Maria, sheltered in a secret location, began the painful process of healing and rebuilding. Teams of psychologists and social workers worked to help them overcome the trauma and plan for a new future. "Mom, do you think one day we can go home?" Anna asked, her voice mixing fear and hope. Maria hugged her daughter, tears in her eyes. "One day, my love, and when we return, it will be to a better, fairer city." At the local newspaper's office, Sophia barely had time to sleep. Her series of reports exposing the corruption network was about to win a journalism award, but she hardly had time to celebrate it. "The story isn't over," she told her colleagues. "There is still so much to be revealed, so much to be changed." As the week came to an end, the city faced an uncertain future, but one filled with possibilities. The fall of the old system paved the way for new leaders, new policies, and new hope. But the question lingering in the air was, would the city be able to seize this moment of catharsis to truly reinvent itself? Or, as so many times in the past, would the old power structures find a way to perpetuate themselves? The metropolis, balanced between its glorious past and uncertain future, eagerly awaited to see what new chapter of its history was about to be written. 3 months had passed since the day the Anna case triggered a revolution in the city. The metropolis, still undergoing transformation, was beginning to show signs of profound and, hopefully, lasting change. Anna, now 13 years old, was sitting on the porch of a retirement home on the outskirts of the city. The fresh air and greenery of the landscape contrasted sharply with the reality she had known until then. Beside her, a psychologist was conducting another therapy session. "How are you feeling today, Anna?" Dr. Clara asked with a warm smile. Anna took a deep breath before answering. "Better, I think. The nightmares are less frequent, but sometimes I'm still afraid that this is just a dream and that I'll wake up in that old life." Anna's recovery journey was long and arduous. Each day brought new challenges, but also small victories. She had started keeping a journal, turning her experiences into words as a form of healing. Meanwhile, in the heart of the city, Maria was attending a meeting with representatives from the Ministry of Justice and NGOs dedicated to protecting children and adolescents. Her voice, once silenced by fear and oppression, now rose strong in defense of other victims. "We cannot allow what happened to Anna to happen again," she declared, her voice filled with emotion and determination. "We need effective public policies and a deep cultural change." Her courage in exposing the truth and collaborating with authorities had inspired other parents to do the same. A growing movement for child protection was gaining strength throughout the metropolitan area. In the local community, Pequeno J, the former drug dealer whose testimony had been crucial in exposing the corruption system, was now leading a social project. With the support of NGOs and companies engaged in social responsibility, he was working to offer alternatives to the youth in the community. "If I could change, everyone can," he told the young people who sought him out. "The important thing is to believe and not give up." Pequeno J's project was already showing promising results. Several young people who once saw drug trafficking as their only option were now dedicating themselves to studies and vocational training activities. At police headquarters, Chief Oliveira faced the challenge of rebuilding the community's trust in law enforcement. A new training program, focused on human rights and community policing, was being implemented. "We are relearning what it means to serve and protect," Oliveira explained during an interview. "Every police officer must understand that their role is to be a guardian of the community, not its oppressor." The results were starting to show. Reports of police abuse had decreased significantly, and initiatives to engage with communities were gaining ground. In the city council, Councilwoman Julia led a special committee to propose reforms in the city's political and judicial system. Her tireless work and integrity had made her one of the most respected political figures in the region. It's not enough to punish the guilty, she argued during a session. We need to create mechanisms to prevent new systems of corruption from taking root. Meanwhile, in the streets and squares of the city, a new atmosphere was palpable. Citizens, known for their critical spirit even in adversity, were now exhibiting cautious optimism. There was a growing sense that this time, the changes could be real and lasting. Visitors arriving in the city noticed the difference. There's a different energy here, commented a tourist. It's as if the city is waking up from a long nightmare. In the local newspaper, Sophia was preparing a special series about the ongoing transformations in the metropolis. Her report focused not only on institutional changes, but also on personal stories of overcoming and rebirth. The real test for our city, she wrote, is not only to dismantle the old corrupt structures, but to build something new and better in their place. As the sun set on the horizon of the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Anna and Maria gathered for a moment of reflection. Sitting on a bench in the garden of the retirement home, mother and daughter contemplated the future. "Do you think we will really be happy one day, Mum?" Anna asked, her voice mixing hope and uncertainty. Maria hugged her daughter, feeling the weight and promise of that moment. "We are already on the path, my love. Happiness is not a destination, it's a journey, and we are learning to walk together, one step at a time." As the first stars began to shine in the night sky, the city continued its own journey of healing and transformation. The metropolis, like Anna, bore deep scars, but also an indomitable resilience and the promise of a brighter dawn. 6 months after the beginning of the great transformation in the city, the metropolis was preparing for an event that promised to be the pinnacle of its change. A special United Nations Commission was about to arrive to assess the changes implemented and potentially use the city as a global model for combating corruption and social reform. The tension was palpable across all sectors of society. This visit represented not only a chance for international recognition, but also a crucial test for the new structures and policies that had been implemented. At the City Hall, the new mayor, Gabriel, a reformist who had emerged from the wave of change, was holding an emergency meeting with his team. "We cannot fail now," Gabriel insisted, his face showing the weight of responsibility. "This is our chance to show the world that our city is not only beautiful, but also an example of renewal and reform." Meanwhile, on the city streets, a frenzied energy was taking over the preparations. NGOs, neighborhood associations, and even former criminals turned community leaders were working tirelessly to showcase the results of their projects. In the local community, Pequeno J was guiding a visit for international journalists, demonstrating the changes in the neighborhood. "Here, where there used to be a drug trafficking spot, we now have a music school," he explained, pride evident in his voice. At the police headquarters, Chief Oliveira was facing his own challenge. The implementation of the new community policing model would be rigorously evaluated by the UN Commission. "Remember," he instructed his officers, "our mission is to protect and serve. Every interaction with the community must reflect this." At the City Council, Councilwoman Julia was preparing to present to the Commission the package of legal and institutional reforms adopted in recent months. Her work had been crucial in creating new mechanisms for transparency and citizen oversight. "We still have a long way to go," she reflected, reviewing her notes, "but the foundations for lasting change are being laid." At a rehabilitation center on the outskirts of the city, Anna, now almost 14, was preparing for a crucial moment. The UN Commission had requested to meet her, recognizing her involuntary but central role in triggering the changes. "Are you sure you want to do this, dear?" Maria asked, concerned. Anna took a deep breath before responding. "Yes, Mum. If my story can help other children, it's worth telling." Journalist Sophia, who had followed the entire saga from the beginning, was preparing a special report to coincide with the UN visit. Her goal was to showcase not only the institutional changes, but also the human stories behind the transformation. "The true miracle of our city," she wrote, "lies not in the numbers or the laws, but in the resilience and hope of its people." As the day of the Commission's arrival approached, a mix of anxiety and expectation engulfed the city. In cafes, on subways, and in communities, the dominant topic was the same. Had the city really changed? At the convention center, transformed into a social innovation hub, the final preparations were being made for the opening ceremony of the visit. The venue had been chosen as a symbol of the bridge between the city's troubled past and its promising future. On the eve of the Commission's arrival, an unexpected event shook the city. A series of anonymous leaks on the internet threatened to expose flaws and contradictions in the reform process. Rumors that members of the old corrupt system were behind this spread quickly. Mayor Gabriel called an emergency meeting with his top advisors and community leaders. The question in the air was how to deal with this threat without compromising the transparency that had become the hallmark of the new administration. As night fell over the city, the metropolis seemed to hold its breath. The next day promised to be a turning point. Would the city be able to show the world that its transformation was real and lasting? Or would the old demons of corruption and inequality find a way to resurface? On the river that cut through the city, the lights reflected on the water like an invitation to reflect on the past and a promise for the future. The metropolis was once again preparing to write a new chapter in its tumultuous and fascinating history. The day dawned in the city with a mix of apprehension and hope hanging in the air. The arrival of the UN Commission coincided with a typical morning in the metropolis. Bright sunshine, blue skies, and a light breeze coming from the river. But the atmosphere in the city was far from calm. At the international airport, a delegation led by Mayor Gabriel was eagerly awaiting the arrival of the international representatives. Television cameras from around the world were positioned, ready to capture every moment. When the doors opened and the Commission members emerged, there was a moment of silence, followed by an explosion of flashes. At the head of the group was Amina, a renowned human rights expert and leader of the mission. "Welcome to our city," Mayor Gabriel greeted, his voice betraying a slight nervousness. Amina responded with a cautious smile. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are eager to see the changes we've heard so much about." The delegation left the airport, heading to the city center, where a series of events and visits were scheduled. However, they had barely left the terminal when news of the online leaks began to spread like wildfire. In the car transporting Amina and other commission members, smartphones were ringing incessantly. "What is happening?" she asked, noticing the sudden agitation. An assistant, visibly disturbed, explained the situation. Supposedly compromising documents were being released online, suggesting that some of the reforms were merely a facade. Mayor Gabriel, in another vehicle, was receiving frantic updates from his team. "We need an immediate response," he ordered. "Total transparency. We won't hide anything." Meanwhile, in the communities, the tension was palpable. In the local community, Pequeno J and other community leaders gathered to discuss what to do. "We can't let this destroy everything we've built," he argued. In the rehabilitation center, Anna watched the news with a mix of fear and determination. "Mom," she said to Maria, "we need to tell our story, the whole truth." Journalist Sophia, who was accompanying the delegation, realized she was in the middle of a story even bigger than she expected. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing with sources offering exclusive information. Throughout the day, the tension in the city increased. The UN Commission, changing its initial agenda, requested an emergency meeting with representatives from all sectors involved in the reform. The convention center, chosen as the headquarters for the visit, became the epicenter of a political and social storm. Politicians, activists, reformed ex-criminals, police officers, and ordinary citizens all converged at the location, determined to be heard. Inside, the scene was one of organized chaos. Mayor Gabriel, Councilwoman Julia, Chief Oliveira, and other leaders were trying to coordinate a coherent response to the leaks. It was at that moment that Anna, accompanied by Maria and journalist Sophia, arrived on the scene. Their presence caused an immediate stir. Amina, recognizing the importance of the moment, made an unprecedented decision. "I want to hear everyone," she announced. "Not just the leaders, but especially those who have been most affected by these changes." What followed was an extraordinary session of testimonies. One by one, representatives from different sectors of society stepped forward to share their stories. Pequeno J spoke about the transformation in the communities. Chief Oliveira explained the challenges of police reform. Councilwoman Julia detailed the new anti-corruption laws, but it was when Anna stood up to speak that the silence became absolute. With a courage that surprised everyone, the young girl told her story, not just the incident that had triggered everything, but also the painful and hopeful process of healing and transformation. "What happened to me was terrible," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "But what came after? The way people from all sectors came together to change things, that gives me hope." As Anna spoke, something extraordinary was happening in the streets of the city. Thousands of people, moved by the live broadcasts of the event, began to gather in front of the convention center. It was a spontaneous demonstration of support for the reforms and the new direction of the city. Amina, visibly emotional, addressed the crowd that now stretched as far as the eye could see. "What we see here today," she declared, "is more than a city in transformation. It is a people who have decided to rewrite their own story." The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the scene. At that moment, it was clear to everyone present that whatever challenges lay ahead, the city had crossed a point of no return. The metropolis, so often defined by its contrasts and contradictions, was now uniting in a common vision of hope and renewal. The case of Anna, which had started as a personal tragedy, had transformed into the catalyst for an unprecedented social revolution. As night fell over the city, a feeling of infinite possibilities hung in the air. The metropolis proved once again its capacity to reinvent itself, emerging stronger and more beautiful from its own ashes. In the weeks following the visit of the UN Commission, the city experienced a period of intense reflection and action. The final report of the Commission, published a month after the visit, surprised the world with its positive and hopeful assessment. "What we witnessed in this city," Amina wrote, "is nothing less than an innovative model of social and political transformation. Although there are still significant challenges to be faced, the determination and unity shown by all sectors of society are truly inspiring. The international recognition brought a new sense of duty and responsibility to the city. Reform projects that had previously faced resistance now received enthusiastic support. Transparency, once viewed with suspicion, was becoming the norm across all levels of government. In the communities, the results were palpable. Schools that barely functioned before were now becoming centers of excellence. Microcredit and entrepreneurship programs flourished, offering real alternatives to crime. Pequeno J, now internationally recognized as an exemplary community leader, expanded his project to other areas. "We are proving that change is possible," he said in interviews. "It's not easy, but it is possible." The police department, under Oliveira's leadership, was becoming an example of community policing. Crime rates were falling, while public trust in law enforcement gradually increased. In the city council, Councilwoman Julia led the implementation of new laws strengthening citizen oversight and participation mechanisms. We are building a stronger and more participatory democracy, she stated. Anna, whose courage had touched hearts around the world, was becoming a symbol of hope and renewal. Now 14 years old, she resumed her studies and dreamed of becoming a lawyer to defend children's rights. "What happened to me was horrible," she said in an emotional speech to young people her age. "But look at what we have been able to do together. None of us are alone in this fight for a better world."